In South Africa, after their biggest election defeat in 30 years, the ruling African National Congress says it will enter coalition talks to form a new government. With virtually all votes counted from Wednesday's poll, the ANC got just over 40% of the vote, failing to win a majority and dropping about 17 points from its score in the last election. Parties must agree to a coalition within 14 days. The ANC's chairman has said they are ready to talk to anybody and everybody. For some analysis, I'm joined in the studio by our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, hello. This is a historically low result for the ANC, and it turns out youth voters really played a big role.
Yeah, and look, there's nothing new and flashing in that headline, right? I mean, in elections everywhere, when you have generational shifts, new generation coming in, you often have them souring on a party that's either been in power a long time, been a dominant party. We've seen it in the United States. We've seen it in Russia. We're seeing it in South Africa. So that's not the breaking news here. What is interesting, though, is the fact that the big issues we've been talking about this election, why has this been happening? What have been the dominant issues? It's been things like soaring unemployment, right? High unemployment. South Africa having the highest, I'm not making this up, the highest unemployment rate in the world, 33% overall. But where it really hits that unemployment number and where your eyes start to open is that among the youth, people anywhere from sort of 18 to 49, it's 45, just over 45%. That's nearly half of the youth population that is unemployed. So you can imagine why some of them might be disinclined to go to the polls and vote for the same party, no matter what its historic, iconic reputation has been, the party of their parents and grandparents, the party of the liberation struggle led by Nelson Mandela. We all remember those heroic images from 30 years ago. But they're disinclined because basically their attitude is, well, show me the money. What have you done for me lately, ANC? So while it's true that a lot of the young generation of voters have grown up in households where they've heard their parents and their grandparents telling them, heroic stories and anecdotes about the struggle to break free of apartheid and white minority rule, real stories, vividly lived stories by only one generation above them, they themselves saw a mixed bag, right? Some of those voters saw the euphoria of those years after 1994. They remember, a lot of them, Nelson Mandela. They were kids. They were young, perhaps, coming into power. They remember how euphoric that time was. But they've also felt since then a lot of despair, and they've felt a lot of disappointment because, like I said at the beginning, they just feel like the ANC has been resting on its laurels, hasn't really done anything for them, and they're not ready to just blindly vote for a party on the basis of its historic, iconic, albeit storied reputation.
So a new generation kind of shifting the balance of power then. South Africa now entering this new era of coalition building. How hard is that going to be for the ANC?
Very tough. Extremely tough coalition talks, often with bitter rivals. One of the stories of this election is there's been more than a dozen, opposition parties, around a dozen, and it's a fragmented political landscape now. And when we're talking the types of parties that they're going to have to negotiate with, there's a new party formed by the former president who's now amidst, still facing corruption allegations, still his legal troubles, Jacob Zuma, swirling around him. He broke away from the ANC, formed a new party named after the ANC's former paramilitary wing, the MK party, which has been doing very well. He says, absolutely no way we would even think of sitting in a coalition with the ANC unless they ditched the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who is an anathema to people like Jacob Zuma. So, and ANC in turn saying there's absolutely no way, as any condition for forming a coalition, that we are going to scrap Ramaphosa. Big question mark, is still over his fate. Will they end up scrapping him? They say for now, absolutely no way. But there are also other parties, some sort of considered radical left parties right now, including MK, but also the EFF. It's an economic freedom party. These are parties that are way to the left of the ANC. And meanwhile, on the other side, you have the second place party, the Democratic Alliance, with about 22% of the vote. It is, a party that's led right now by white minority figures, white-led party, seen as very business-friendly, seen as to the right of center. And so any choice they make for a coalition is going to involve very, very tough concessions. What the ANC is saying, while these will be tough talks, what the ANC is very clear in saying is it's trying to send the message, we've heard you. We've gotten the message. We have a lot of work to do to clean up our own house right now. We are humbled by this outcome. So they're not in denial about it, but that doesn't mean it's going to be easy to form a coalition. They have 2 weeks to do so. the end of those 2 weeks after the results are declared, 2 weeks to do so, the new parliament will sit, and that parliament is the one that's going to have to choose a new president. So there is a lot of what ifs right now looming above this electoral equation. We'll know in a couple of hours the official results, and then it's anyone's guess from there.
It's going to be a very interesting 2 weeks coming up in South Africa. Doug, thank you so much for that. That's our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert.